Netcasts you love.
From people you trust.
This is Twit.
Bandwidth for Twitch is provided by CacheFly at CACHEFLY.com.
This is Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware, episode number 68 for April 29th. I'm Thuban. Thanks for asking. This episode is brought to you by Squarespace.com, the fast and easy way to publish a high-quality website or blog. For a free trial and 10% off your new account, go to Squarespace.com and use offer code TWITCH. And by Drobo, the original S, Pro, and New Elite, offering expandable storage products for individuals, small businesses, and creative teams. For more information and instant rebates, visit drobo.com/twitch. Welcome to Twitch, This Week in Computer Hardware. I'm Ryan Shrout, and we're going to take you through some of the highlights of news and geekery that is found in the world of computer hardware. I'm joined once again by Colleen, and we are pleased to welcome back Patrick Norton, who apparently we didn't scare hardly enough, but he was willing to come back on another week.
I'm difficult to scare at this point.
Well, welcome back. We appreciate it.
Thanks, man.
Let's go ahead and start talking about some cool and interesting things. One first topic I wanted to mention is I know you have a lot of experience, maybe not a lot of experience, but a lot of interest in what's going on in the world of 3D TVs for home theater. I know that's kind of one of your focuses on the show you do, HD Nation, with Robert. So I kind of wanted to get your opinion on this. Had you ever previously used any of the NVIDIA 3D vision technology before for like gaming and that kind of stuff on the PC?
A little bit. I'm not as big a gamer as I used to be because as I got older, I found there were fewer hours in the day, and spending 12 hours killing pixels was a surefire way to not get the laundry done and really piss off everyone around me.
Yes, understandable.
I will say that the current version of the NVIDIA Shutter guy, this is like one of my running, like Shutter 3D is one of my running jokes because, it's one of those things like for years and years and years, some PR person would call up and be like, we've changed everything about gaming. We have 3D in games. And look, there's these cool glasses. And it's like, oh, it's the same. Somebody found like another container load or 5 of those glasses in China and they're selling them again because it seemed like every few years from the mid-90s on, every 2 years or so, somebody would raise some money in an effort to revive 3D gaming. The NVIDIA stuff actually looks pretty good, which is nice. It's a little bit of a different technology than what's used on 3D HDTV, but I think you should start with, I actually was really fascinating about Verde and the fact that NVIDIA has a, I was actually kind of like, I said like, you can download NVIDIA graphics for notebooks without having to go to the vendors. Can somebody call AMD? Please, quickly.
AMD is actually working on this, but you're right. NVIDIA did kind of make the first push for this. It's one of those things that you don't really think about until you need that support, right? You're used to just being able to go to NVIDIA.com or ATI.com and download the updated graphics driver for your hardware to fix any number of either performance issues or performance bugs or glitches and any kind of other software and that kind of stuff. But for a long time, you couldn't do that with notebooks. You were dependent on Lenovo or Sony or Toshiba to take a driver from NVIDIA, take the time to wrap their own kind of functionality into it, and release a driver update. And it didn't happen very often. I had a Sony machine that I think went the whole 2 years I used it, never having a graphics update.
That's pretty common. I always get frustrated because I'll find out there's some feature that's been implemented in the driver, or I'll go up and look at the processor and the driver will be like several revs beyond what I have. And then you go to download it and then they're like, you can't download it. You have to go to your OEM vendor, and you go to the OEM vendor's website and yeah, your driver's a year old. And that's so pathetically common in notebooks, and it keeps, the thing I always hear from vendors is that, well, notebook motherboards are very sophisticated, and we have to, to use your language, tune it to work properly with the motherboard. I don't think I buy that because everybody's using the same chipset, everybody's using the same chips, everybody's using the same graphics processor. It seems like more like they want to do QA internally.
That's definitely part of it, but there was the technical limitation they were running into was all of the hotkeys that you have on your laptop for brightness up and down, or any power saving features, any of the custom software they have that might turn down the GPU clock speeds or turn down the brightness levels.
That's in the driver software?
Yes, it's all integrated into one package. So they have to QA their own power management software with each driver revision. So that's why they didn't do it. But what NVIDIA has done to fix it is they re-architected the driver so that they were compartmentalized differently now. So they basically, the driver, you can update the graphics driver and it will update all of those components but leave the rest of the parts alone, so that we don't have this issue anymore where, OEMs feel the need to wait 18 months, 24 months between driver updates. Their parts of the driver that they need maintain they stay the same. And NVIDIA's graphics updates don't break any of those issues. I mean, you could always get hacked drivers for laptops. You could go get, I forget, driver cleaner or something. No, that's the removal tool. But there was a tool like that you could take a desktop driver, hack the install files a little bit, and then install them on your laptop. But you lost a lot of kind of the power saving features and that kind of stuff when you did it. So with the Verde releases, that is no longer the issue. There's only one vendor, ironically enough, that doesn't allow this, because it's still kind of that you have the Dells and those guys of the world have to allow it to be installed on their system, and everybody has agreed to do that except Sony at this point. So
I don't really use Sony's notebooks.
and there's one reason why, right?
Not going to miss them.
No, I pretty much use Dells. If I'm not using it's basically Apple or Dell or pretty much everything we own.
Or Lenovo.
Lenovo's are good.
I like Lenovo's notebooks. I've been using a T400S. They're very solid. The Lenovo's are solid. I just happen to usually, when I'm spending my own money, I ended up spending it on a Dell.
Yeah,
it's just kind of fair. Maybe it's force of habit at this point.
It's interesting. One of those things you were talking about where they would release a feature that you couldn't get on your notebook. I mean, there was an example that NVIDIA gave us on one laptop. I think it was a Sony that hadn't been updated since driver release 179 from NVIDIA. Now we're up to 197, I think. And things like support for OpenGL 3.2, direct compute, OpenCL support, 300 SLI profiles if you had one of the high performance machines. And then the big one, Flash 10.1 acceleration, wasn't, without the updated drivers, you didn't get any of those benefits.
Right.
If you had that Sony laptop or any of these Sony laptops that don't do it. So it's good to see that these updates are coming. But on the 3D thing, one of the things that they told us about, NVIDIA told us during this meeting I had with them, was that they're releasing this software called NVIDIA 3D TV Play.
Right.
And what it will do is enable 3D vision features, essentially, to run on any TV or display that supports 3D technologies. So, the Samsung TVs or whoever, and you'll use whether it's active glasses or passive glasses, it all depends on the system of the TV, what the TV is using. So it basically allows you to plug in your laptop or, a desktop. So imagine now you can build a home theater PC that will, using an NVIDIA graphics card and the software, be able to output 3D Blu-ray. We'll be able to output 3D games, all using, you don't have to buy NVIDIA's glasses. You can use whatever it comes with. So this I like this. It seems to me that you're going to get a lot of choice now in this still relatively small pool of 3D technology.
Yeah, no, you'll still have to buy a Blu-ray playback software to play back Blu-rays. That's not going to be included in the 3D TV Play. But yeah, it's kind of interesting because my understanding was that the way the NVIDIA 3D was handling was different than the way that most of the 3D HD manufacturers were going. And yeah, it's cool to see them actually throw a patch on there. So you can basically use your NVIDIA card to output over basically, of course, you're going to need a new 3D HDTV, which is the 1.4, HDMI 1.4 inputs on there. I think it's smart. Unfortunately, I'll have to dig around and see whether or not it'd be really cool if with older home theater PCs it'll actually work with an older home theater PC to use your existing 3D TV play card. Yeah, it's like 3D TV play compatible card That's a kind of
it goes back pretty far. The compatibility as far as the GPUs go, even on the mobile front. The gaming is obviously dependent on your system's ability to output enough power to output 120 frames per second, which is essentially what it has to do 60 to each eye. But I mean, in terms of supporting 3D Blu-ray and 3D applications and pictures and all that kind of stuff, almost all of the GeForce GT 300 series mobility parts will support it. And so I'd imagine majority of consumer desktop parts will support all that as well. 3D Blu-ray is a little bit tricky because there was some kind of hardware change they had to make in order to support 3D Blu-ray. That's why the 300 series in the mobile side does support it, but the 200 series cannot physically do it, even if they're high-performance parts. So I'll have to find out where that cutoff line is for the desktop, but it does open things up. And to me, it's kind of almost like NVIDIA admitting that maybe the 3D vision part of it, like their releasing of glasses and that kind of stuff, will probably be coming to an end relatively soon, because they,
they ran out of they found 3 containers. They upgraded the firmware. They had a good run with the video games, because doing it from
the only interesting thing left is the 3D Vision Surround that they're going to come out with this year, and that's where you can hook up 3 120 hertz monitors to your PC and play surround gaming while using the 3D glasses and 3D vision that way. That'll
Imagine playing sorry.
No, I was going to say it'll be out like in May, I think.
Imagine playing like Battlefield, Bad Company 2, or I know people who are, I can see them already thinking like, wait a minute, World of Warcraft on my HD TV? Wait, what if I do 3 HD TVs? I can see there's people I know who are never going to leave their house.
Colleen seems intrigued. Because you could get, if you've got the budget for it, you could get 3 65-inch Samsung 3D TVs, hook them up through DVI to a GTX 480 SLI system, and have absolutely enormous 3D Vision surround gaming platform.
Don't forget crisp and detailed, not just enormous.
Exactly.
Or you could do like 3 1080p projectors, or if you want to do cut rate, you could do like the Mitsubishi rear projection, the Mitsubishi DLPs.
The DLPs, yeah. If you can buy those, I bet they're cheap now too.
They're still selling them. It's actually the cheapest way to get, unless you want to buy a projector, it's the cheapest way to get like a 65-inch screen these days. And Mitsubishi's the last one standing on the rear projection.
Yes, they are. When 3D Vision first came out last year, I actually went to Best Buy and took the 3D Vision kit to a Best Buy store, and they had the DLPs kind of like back in a corner all by themselves. There were like 3 or 4 left, and hooked them up and played with it there. It was kind of fun, but yeah. So yeah, I think overall the Verde driver stuff that we're talking about, very cool. The 3D TV Play software is kind of NVIDIA's way of mapping their graphics hardware to the entire gamut of 3D display technologies.
I think
and
that's
they're going to try
smart.
to make a play there. Yes, I think it is very smart. Now let's take a moment real quick and thank the first of today's sponsors. This episode of Twitch is brought to you by Squarespace.com, the fast and easy way to publish a high-quality website or blog. Squarespace.com has easy-to-use user interface for creating and managing a website or blog. It's optimized for both beginners and CSS experts, so if you want to get down to the nitty-gritty and code things yourself, you can do that. Or you can use one of the hundreds of design templates and start from there, and then modify to your heart's content. It is an all-inclusive service. It's not just web design. It's also the web hosting. It includes services like blog modules, form modules, photo galleries, form builders. You can integrate Google Maps and a lot more. Has pretty detailed website tracking, built-in search engine optimizer, permission access, all kinds of different things to do in terms of what you actually want to build onto your website. It has a pretty innovative drag and drop Ajax interface. So if you want to move different components of the website around, if you want to move, news highlights up to the top of the page and have details on one column and something else in the right-hand column, you can do that without having to know code and using their templates in the drag and drop interface. It's actually pretty intuitive. For a free trial, all you have to do is go to squarespace.com. You don't need a credit card. You can try it out and build your website. I think you get 2 weeks free trial. See if it's something you're interested in. I think you will like it. If you decide to purchase, you can get 10% off when you enter the offer code TWICH, TWICH. So if you go to squarespace.com and use the offer code TWICH, you can save 10% off of the lifetime of your order. So we thank Squarespace for their support. Moving right along, processor world. We talked a little bit about processors and kind of dramatic overclocking methods for them last week. Nothing as exciting today, I don't think, unless you find the idea of getting a 6-core processor for about $285. Pretty exciting. And actually, I think somebody told me there was a $50 rebate at Tiger Direct for it. So it's like $240 or something like that for a native 6-core AMD processor.
I can has?
You can.
That's a pretty good price. And it's the AMD Phenom II.
AMD, the entire model number is
the AMD Thuban?
Yeah, AMD Phenom II X6 1090T. So the X6 indicates that it's a 6-core part as opposed to the previous models that were all X4s or X3s. That's actually very intuitive. I think one of those things that Intel should maybe pay attention to. And then 1090T is just kind of this esoteric model numbering system. It is the Thuban core.
Thuban?
Thuban, the speech impediment core. So it's a pretty fast processor. It runs at 3.2 gigahertz. I think it has 9 megs of total cache, 6 megs L3, and then 512 kilobytes on each core. We ran a lot of benchmarks through it, and one of the interesting things, I think we might talk about this a couple weeks ago, turbo core technology. This actually lets the 3.2 gigahertz processor run as high as 3.6 gigahertz when only 3 cores are running. So much like we know can happen with the Intel turbo mode technology, where based on the load of the processor, the CPU will dynamically adjust its frequency. This AMD does that to a certain extent, but it's much more black and white. It's either on or it's off, whereas Intel's will have a lot of steppings to it.
Right.
But it gets the job done. In my experience, I do have to say it was a little bit less predictable than what Intel was doing. It would seem to me that I think the processor was more sensitive in terms of when it would actually enable that turbo core technology, when it would actually up the clock speed of those other 3 parts, because there were definitely some instances where I was running 2 or 3 threads purposely trying to get this processor and test these features, where it would jump a lot between 3.2 and 3.6 as the operating system kind of moved threads between processor cores and that kind of stuff. So even though there were only 3 main things going on, it seemed to be a little bit confused when it was jumping around a lot, and you would see the frequency move up and down pretty frequently. So that's
interesting.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things. It's technically it's free performance, right? So when you can get it, great.
Nothing is free.
We tested it in our benchmarks, and so you can see it with the turbo mode on and with the turbo mode off. So you'll be able to see kind of what differences we actually found with it. And it wasn't super dramatic, and I think a lot of it is because it was kind of doing this jumping around thing. But in terms of comparison to Intel, everybody always wants to know every time there's an AMD CPU release, well, does this finally...
I was about to ask.
Yeah.
Does it?
Is it finally competing with Intel's parts? And it's no, Intel has one 6-core part out, and that's the Core i7-980X. That's a $1,200 processor when you can find it on Newegg and that kind of stuff. It's not going to compete with that at all, really, in terms of performance. But where it can compete is with the Core i7-860, 870 line of processors. And that's pretty good, because
that's about the price range it's in, right?
It's actually a little bit lower than those parts, because and that's one of the benefits you get here is you're getting a 6-core part instead of a 4-core hyper-threaded part. So depending on the workload and what kind of stuff's actually going on, that will dramatically affect performance. But if we look at, let me go to this last page of the review we did. You look at, we actually have a table that sets up performance per dollar in this type of metric that doesn't really make any sense in other than this very discussion. So if you look at the top line, look at Handbrake, for example. 0.41. That's a metric of performance per dollar, something like frames per second per dollar, or something like something
is
to that
higher
effect.
better or lower better?
In these, higher is better. So then you look at the Core i7 860 and it's 0.38. So the Phenom II X6 is a better value in terms of how much performance you get per dollar, and it's much, much better than the Core i7 870. Now, very back and forth there, but if you compare that to the Intel 6-core processor right below it, you can see the difference there, 0.41 versus 0.16 in Handbrake. That's a big difference. You're paying, $1,000+ versus paying $285, and then you're looking at the performance differences, and it's just not, the weights aren't there for it. So I think AMD actually has a pretty compelling product. Their chipsets are good now. We're back up. I think they released the new 890FX chipset with this, which isn't anything super dramatic, although it is the first chipset to integrate SATA 6G support into the chipset.
And USB
directly.
3.0.
It's not the motherboards have it, but it's not integrated into the chipset.
Oh, it's not. So it's SATA 6G, but USB 2.0.
Yes, and then they're adding USB 3.0 with the same external chip as everybody else. But it's good in terms of performance per dollar and performance per watt. If you are interested in that kind of thing as well, we were able to overclock it to 4 gigahertz really easily without even using a high-end air cooler. Right? I know Patrick and I were talking a lot about.
We're using the factory one or just a cheap one?
No, I think it was a factory one from a previous CPU release. Because that's just what I happen to have on hand. They didn't send a heatsink with this processor.
Because remember, with the most recent Intel review, you guys got some really slick new Intel heatsink that had the crossflow technology on it.
Yeah, this didn't have anything like that. It was a very basic AMD branded cooler. It wasn't anything like a step up because it is a 6-core part or anything like that. So I think they did a really good job with this part. I am interested to see what the uptake is for it. Josh has a couple of motherboards that he's testing on this already, one from ASUS and one from MSI that have some pretty compelling features on it and that kind of thing. So, one of our Twitter questions we'll see later kind of asks about which platform would you build if you're looking for like a 5-year system and that kind of stuff. And it's almost impossible to answer that question and try to predict.
Well, it also depends on how patient you are, because I used, I've used $500 PCs for 4 or 5 years, but you have to really kind of, contain yourself and not go use, if you go over to your buddy's house who has like the new system every year, it'll be a little painful. But I was actually kind of pleasantly surprised for AMD. It looks like the Tiger deals that everybody's been talking about for the 1055T and the 1090T are actually both sold out, because both processors are showing up as currently unavailable.
That's good. I hope that they've sold 500 or 1,000 of them rather than 50 or 100. But my understanding was that they were going to be pretty well in stock across the board. And it's one of those things. Newegg or Tiger Direct had that great deal today. I think Newegg was selling their parts for $310, so they were kind of marking them up a little bit, which happens often on first week releases and that kind of stuff. But I think it's important that we have this competition for Intel in this market. We talked last week, I believe, about the lack of competition for Intel in the chipset world for Intel platforms kind of led to what I think is a very, very slow progression in features for all of Intel's chipsets over the last year and what will be for the rest of this year. And we don't want that to happen everywhere else.
No, Intel's engineering is always much, much better when they have somebody nipping at their heels. AMD is a perfect example of that. For a while, AMD was the performance king, and Intel sat down. I want to say maybe Pat Gelsinger at Intel basically sat down and they completely re-architected the way they design processors and the entire process, not just kind of like the engineering side of it, but the management side of it, and going into the whole sort of TikTok thing with the crew in Israel and the crew in the United States. Just I would probably say there's a lot of pride and a lot of fight in between those two groups to see who can do the best job.
Yes, so the internals and the kind of office politics, I guess, cross office politics are pretty interesting to see. That's for sure. So yeah, if you're interested in learning about that the Thuban, the Phenom II X6. Go to the PCPer.com. We got a review up of it as of last night at midnight. Another AMD product I will mention real quick is the FirePro 2460. We don't usually talk a lot about professional level graphics cards and that kind of stuff on here, but I wanted to mention this because this is a graphics card that's not meant for 3D gaming or anything like that. It has an average power usage of 13 watts. But what's important about it is that it supports 4 monitor outputs. It has 4 mini DisplayPort connections on it, and it will fit in a
single
low profile, half height form factor. So into your home theater PC, into any of those kind of, the really small desktops
and
you see for sale at Best Buy or Fry's. It is passively cooled. It's got the FirePro moniker on it, which is AMD's professional level of cards. And the reason for that is so they can charge a little bit more for it than they would get away with in the consumer market. And they're kind of targeting this towards day traders and anybody who really sees a value in having 4 displays hooked up to a computer, and you don't need to do gaming or rendering and that kind of stuff, right? The card I think will sell for $299, which is on the high end for a consumer graphics card. But this isn't a consumer graphics card. It's a write-off for somebody that makes a lot of money. Exactly. And that's why when you see, the FirePro cards we reviewed last week or 2 weeks ago are $1,500 plus for the same hardware essentially that you can find in a $300 or $400 consumer card.
This is a really cool part.
It is. It's, for me, if this were a $100 or $150 part, I would recommend it to a lot of people. At $300, it's almost like, I think you'd be better off getting a 5870 or something for that price, and having one less display, but actually have gaming horsepower. Because this, it's got 512 megs memory. It does support DX11 and OpenGL technologies and that kind of stuff. But it's the fact that they didn't even mention what clock speeds are running at, how many shaders the GPU has, and that kind of stuff tells you that this is not meant for anything like that. So don't expect it to do that. So but hey, if you to me, it's almost like, well, it's double that. If you double that, if you go from $299 to $600 or so, you can get that AMD, the 5870 Infinity 6 card that has 6 display outputs. It's a consumer level card. Now if you want a lot of monitors, you can always get that. But you can look like that guy, right? Set a couple of those up, and you'll be living like that, and it'll be pretty hot in your office too, I would guess.
I think they can probably afford air conditioning if they can afford all those monitors.
Very true. Very true.
Is the market for those particularly big? How many people are actually going to buy do you call them 6-head cards at this point?
Yeah, they have. Yeah, we have. We've had on here. I don't have it in arm's reach, but we have the 6-head card that is 6 mini DisplayPort connections on it, and that's used for the Infinity 6 monitor gaming configurations, which we've had discussions about on this show and on the PC Perspective podcast many times. Bezel issues and all that other stuff aside, it's a very compelling technology demonstration, if nothing else.
Mm-hmm. I think it's just a Halo product. I don't think that it's so much that many people are going to buy it as, AMD can pull it out whenever there's a trade show and they can have 6 monitors and be like, yeah,
and trust me, they're doing that every time. Yeah.
It's funny how that works.
All right, I do want to mention our newest sponsor for Twitch, and that is Drobo. I think we have some fans of Drobo on the call right now. I know Colleen is one. Patrick is one. I have never used the devices personally, but I know Alan, who does our storage testing, absolutely loves his Drobo.
Well, I think Alan's a little frustrated with Drobo because he was trying to find a way to break it. And he was unable to, so he has this long document.
It hurt his feelings that he couldn't do it.
Well, and he thought he was going to be able to. They kind of embarrassed him. So what he did is he tried to simulate all these possible scenarios where he's like, okay, I'm going to pull one drive, and while it rebuilds, I'm going to unplug the power and then plug it back in and see if that'll break it. And he tried everything.
No, it didn't.
And then he was unable to break it, and he sent this huge file of data to Drobo saying, these are all the things I tried to do to break it and I couldn't. And so I think he had his tail between his legs a little bit, which is, I guess that's a good thing to fail
for them, it's fantastic, right? And it's good for us as consumers. Yeah.
Well, anybody's ever had to maintain a NAS, especially in a video production environment.
The sand.
Yeah, the sand and NAS, whatever you're storing your video on, where you're basically, when you're filling one of these boxes every 6 months, the idea of being able to yank a couple drives out, throw in, a couple of the latest, greatest hard drives, because 2 terabyte drives are selling for $189 right now. A year ago, that was a 1.5, not even, probably 6 months ago, that was 1.5 terabyte drive. 1 terabyte drives are selling for I want to say, I've seen them on sale for $85 around us in San Francisco. And you can sit there and basically you can you
can play cards with them.
They're not just storage devices, they're wonderful paperweights. Speaking of which, we actually had Scott Moulton, who does hard drive recovery. He's done a bunch of talks at DEF CON on Techzilla this week that comes out Thursday. And he talks about the hard drives he's seeing come in the most right now in terms of failures, which is a really interesting perspective on buying hard drives. It's certainly impacting my next set of hard drive purchases. But the Drobo is actually really sweet, because if you're building a lot of content constantly, photographers, like people who do wedding videos or video production, if you need more space, you buy more of the largest hard drive out there, unless you've got to the point where you have 4 or 5 of the biggest hard drive that's available, and then you run out of space, in which case you need a second box or some archival system. But you were saying,
well, they wanted us to mention their 2 newly developed storage devices, the Drobo S and the Drobo Elite. Brings their model count up to just S. Just S. 4 different Drobos for individuals, small business, creative professionals, teams of creative professionals, and of course the crazy people like Alan. Those models are: the original Drobo has 4 disk bays, great for home users. Store your iTunes library, your music, your videos, photo collection, that kind of stuff. I think a lot of people in the digital age take a lot of digital pictures, copy them to their computer, and don't think anything about it. That's a pretty big mistake if you're not backing things up. The new one is the Drobo S, which is a 5-disc bay, provides higher performance for creative professionals that need it. The Drobo Pro for small businesses is an 8-disc bay model. And then the newest model is the Drobo Elite that has 8 disc bays. It's different because it's network storage, as Colleen was mentioning, the storage array network. It's a SAN device. It supports up to 16 computer connections, and it will actually support, it has 2 gigabit Ethernet ports on it, so you can connect 2 hosts using iSCSI.
Yep.
So it makes it appear to be a local disk drive. So it's easy in terms of using it on a daily basis. You don't have to copy things over. It's just like accessing any normal drive. If you want to learn more about Drobo, more than what we have told you already, and figure out which model is going to be right for you, then go to drobo.com/Twitch, and they have some specific discounts for you as well. If you use that URL, drobo.com/Twitch, you can learn all about each model in terms of their safety, capacity, performance, and price. And like I said, I think you can save up to, if you buy the expensive model, I think you can save up to $1,200 by using that option there. If you're going to get, well, let's see, they're 2 Drobo Pros plus 16 2-terabyte hard drives. You'll save $1,200 over the normal price on that. So I know Alan was excited when I told him that we had Drobo as a sponsor on this, and we welcome their support and their devices as well. So
yeah, I've got a quick little story about Drobo actually. Yeah. So we've got a SAN here, which we love for its speed because, using fiber channel, we're able to get up to 300 megabytes a second real-world transfer speed while we're editing. Mm-hmm. It's unreliable as hell. I'm sure that Mr. Patrick Norton over here has some stories about SANs as well.
No.
Yeah, well, they suck to administer, and I hate it.
Certainly not ones from Apple.
No, none. Never. So what we're doing is we're getting a Drobo Elite here to back our SAN up, and it's where we're going to keep all of our stuff for nearline storage, as well as whenever our SAN goes down, we're just going to use the Elite as our SAN. So I can't wait to get it installed so that I can just start popping more drives in and be done with it, because I literally, and I don't mean that in the fake use of the word literally, the actual sense of the word literally, have a stack of books that I have to read just to learn how to work the SAN, and it drives me insane. And whenever it goes down, the entire business stops, and my heart sinks. I hate it.
And you have a lot of work to do, though.
And well, sometimes people say, Colleen, one of the NASs stopped working. I say, okay, NAS or SAN. One is easy, and one I have a very bad day.
Good point. Good point. Let's see. What was else on our list? Let's talk about people buying other people. There were a couple of stories that we both, or all of us, were kind of paying attention to. The first one being Google buying, I'm going to screw up pronouncing this name again, Agnilux. I'm going to go with Agnilux.
Agnilux sounds good.
Okay. And Colleen, you were the one that kind of pointed us to this story. Who are Agnilux exactly? Do we know?
As far as I know, nobody entirely knows. They're still a stealth mode startup. But what's being reported is that it's got a bunch of ex-Apple and PA semi-people, which makes me think ARM, which makes me think... But they were doing server stuff, unlike most ARM companies, which are doing mobile stuff. So I'm just kind of... I'm curious what Google's play is here. Are they looking to make their servers more efficient using ARM architecture, or are they making... are they going to try to get these guys to start working on their Android stuff? I don't know. I'm kind of curious.
This story on 9to5Mac mentions that prior to Google's purchase, both Microsoft and Texas Instruments previously held investment talks with Agnilux. So they must be doing something cool, whatever it was. My first notion was that if they're really based in the ARM architecture, it's hard to see Google wanting to use that for the server world. Because, well, mostly because server world depends on high performance parts. ARM is very, very power efficient, but there's a vast difference between the processing power of, say, the iPad and your typical $1,000 server.
Right, but what if they have a server farm full of ARM chips?
I guess part of that makes me think, because everything I'm hearing now for people doing large, I mean, Google kind of invented this problem or perfected it. One of the biggest challenges for server farms right now is they're literally locating land that's near a massive source of inexpensive power. Like hydroelectric or something like that, which is why you keep seeing these pictures that float up. Google builds another giant box to fill with servers, because they're literally looking for a place that they're basically choosing, you know, because it's the internet, right? So you can put your warehouse wherever, but they're literally choosing these locations based on the amount of power they can get to them. And I wonder if at this point their server needs are so ridiculously out of control that they're looking for a way to make them power efficiency is getting to be more important than the actual clock or the actual clock speed or the amount of work they can do with a single processor.
And it's when you think of them in the sense of an entire farm. I mean, sure, one chip is not as fast as one chip, but what if it's 5 chips doing X amount of work as one chip, and is that chip 1/4 of the power?
I mean, you guys, you both make very accurate points in that in the world of servers. It's ironic because when I was in Austin last week, this was the whole discussion that we were having with AMD, and they were basically telling us, look, customers aren't coming to Dell and HP anymore saying, give us the fastest servers you have. They're not saying that anymore. They're saying, give us the fastest servers that fit under this power envelope.
It's an equation of power and heat and space and cost and longevity for an overall performance per dollar that they're trying to hit. It's interesting in a lot of these cloud companies, and Google being one of the bigger players there, and Amazon obviously as well, when they're talking to HP and Dell and they're asking for these customs, I mean, you're talking about guys who are buying 25,000 servers at a pop, right? I mean, they'll shut down a server farm and then they'll turn it back on, and some computers won't come back on, and that's okay. It's not worth their time.
Right. But what they do is they're actually asking people, processor and technology companies to say, I want you to build a processor that limits itself or lets us limit it to 50 watts of power consumption, regardless of the server load. And if we have a big spike or something like that in traffic, we can flip that switch and let it go to a higher performing part. So, the concerns of power in the server farm world are huge. A lot of companies are saying they spend more on power than they actually spend on the hardware. But in terms of that balance between performance and power efficiency, you have to, and in space obviously as well. To me, still the idea of running ARM processors, I still feel like you're going to be able to get better power efficiency in terms of if you use one 12-core AMD server processor that runs at 110 watts or 90 watts, I think you'll be able to get more out of that in terms of how many virtualized servers can you run than if you have, say, 10 ARM processors that add up to that same 100 watts or 90 watts, right? If that's kind of what we're basing it on. So, I mean, they could, if you can fit, I've seen 1U boxes that can hold 4 12-core processors. I mean, think about that. We're talking about a 1U server that can hold 48 cores of processing in it. It's using a lot more power. Maybe you can store 100 ARM processors in there from this Agnilux company, and maybe that's worthwhile to them.
So to approach it from a completely different angle, what if it's technology that could be applicable to smartphones? ARM processor use in smartphones or something to compete against. I'm sorry?
Android.
That seems to make more sense to me. So here Google's buying up this company to make sure they can adequately compete with what Apple has done on the A4, right? Mm-hmm. So Apple bought, what was the, we were just, that's the next on our list. They bought PA Semi.
Well, Apple bought PA Semi a while ago, but they also literally, like today, it was announced that they bought Intrinsity, which is, they basically make tools that allow you to jack up ARM processors from 650 hertz up to 1 gigahertz. So basically, Google is now going to be sitting on the rights for all that. And I mean, it's also really interesting because Agnilux, which also comes out of PA Semi history, one of the chiefs there, the director of application software, used to be one of the main architects over at TiVo. So that makes me wonder if there's a set-top box play or a mobile play on that.
Google's been working on set-top boxes recently.
Yeah, but in that case, in the set-top box stuff that Google's been playing with recently is more about targeted ad distribution, so that it will know that Colleen is watching, so all of a sudden there's going to be a whole bunch of turbocharger ads instead of you know what I mean, like the idea that the same sort of targeted ad serving that they do for websites is actually going to show up for video distribution.
What the Colleen ads are going to be? It's going to be like eyeliner, turbochargers, food, caffeine.
It's it's interesting. Maybe Google's getting into this because they needed a higher end processor for their Android tablet device. Much like Apple had to get a higher performance part for their iPad. There's all kinds of things that Google could be doing, and I, honestly, it was probably less than a drop in the bucket of what Google has in cash to buy this company up and see if it turns into anything. Same thing with Apple.
Apple's sitting on $41 billion in cash reserves right now. So you know what I mean? Like,
I sure wish I had a ARM company to sell today.
But what's interesting is there's a lot of excitement about ARM right now, not x86, and people complaining that they're not allowed to make x86 parts. And I mean, the reason I was talking about servers is because Agnilux says they were working on server technology. We're pulling it out of our butts that because everyone else...
That could have been a smokescreen. Yeah, we're working on servers.
Right. It's true that it could be that. I mean, I think either one is interesting. People doing their own hardware for that. I feel like from what I've seen ARM processors doing in mobile devices, that there's some way you could build multi-core ARM processors and just fit a ton of them in server racks and do it.
They're already doing that with the Atom processor. Intel has built huge compilations of Atom cores and stuff. I know. It's important to realize the difference between...
Colleen, embrace your inner PC.
I have no problem with it when
it's important to realize the benefits that you get with x86.
Okay,
you get scalability that you don't get anywhere else. You get compatibility you don't get anywhere else. Remember, there are still people using COBOL-based databases, and realize that enterprise doesn't like change.
Right.
I think a sudden jump to a whole... now, instead of programming for a 12-core system for x86, you're going to have to program for 150 ARM processors. Go. I don't see them adopting that very quickly.
I could see Google doing it for themselves because their needs are so vast, and and they run everything on Linux, their own custom Linux distribution, and Linux can run on ARM.
That's true.
So I'm not, maybe
you get every Google Docs spawn gets one ARM processor.
Gets one core.
Yeah.
Who knows? I don't know. It's fun to. I want to see where this goes. It's just an interesting hypothetical situation.
Yep. Okay. I had a couple of, actually, it was ironic. You mentioned, we're talking about small form factor, low power things. This little box that I'm holding up here
Your brain.
is a, what is this? This is the VIA. It's VIA.
Is that an Artigo?
Flash from the past. It is an Artigo A1100. And so this is, I'm going to have to cheat here and read the specs off this box because I just got it in. It's a VIA Nano 1.2 gigahertz 64-bit processor with obviously the VIA integrated chipsets. It has up to 2 gigs of DDR2 memory in it, support for 1 2.5-inch SATA hard drive or SSD, obviously. Has SD card support, supports MPEG-2, H.264 resolution decoding acceleration up to 1080p, has 802.11g built into it, 4 USB ports.
Remember the wireless broadband aggregation device I was using at CES? That was just one of these running a custom BSD kernel.
Ah, okay.
Mushroom.
Look at that. I see right through it. Look, you know more about this piece of hardware than I do. Then I literally just got it in, but it's
so shiny.
It's tiny, and I'm curious to see what all I could make it do. Obviously, Colleen, you had what was yours running exactly there? I
was a custom BSD kernel.
I mean, what was its function though?
Oh, whoa! That's a strange phone call that's coming in over your face. The function that we were using it for was a wireless broadband aggregator for bonding. So basically, I'd plug in multiple USB mobile broadband modems, and it would pool across them and combine the bandwidth, and then go to their back end and get reassembled and out to the internet.
So you weren't doing any transcoding video or anything like that with it?
No.
Because it's amazing, as long as you're not transcoding video, it's amazing how tiny a processor you can that'll deal with most home server or small office server environments.
Yeah, all this was a network appliance essentially.
Mm-hmm. And the VIA Nano processor doesn't get a lot of talk, right? And it was one of those things. We've had a lot of experience with VIA, and we tested those parts when the Atom was first coming out, and the whole debate was going to be who was going to win, Nano or Atom, and obviously Atom just completely destroyed Nano because it had Intel's name behind it, and they had their platforms and all that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. But the Nano is still a very competitive part in terms of its performance levels, and it's, in my opinion, it is a better processor, especially for a device like this where it's going to be plugged in. It's not battery operated necessarily. It's still low power, and it's not passive. It has a little tiny fan on here, but it's going to be pretty quiet and pretty cool, but it's going to be able to do a whole lot of stuff like you were saying, Patrick. I mean, look at the Roku box, what it does with what hardware it has.
Yeah, I was just talking with them today. I was telling them how cool I was when I took their box apart, how impressed I was at how much they do with so little.
Yeah. It's pretty neat. Another little interesting thing I was playing with today, and I think a lot of people will be interested in this. And this is
show and tell.
It is. It's this hardware show and tell.
Like looking for the camera feed.
Yeah. This is what did Ryan get in the last couple of days. And so this is a Super Talent USB 3.0 thumb drive.
Supercrypt.
And it's called Supercrypt because it's AES encrypted drive. One thing I'll tell you about it is it's pretty big for a USB thumb drive.
Whoa, I wasn't expecting it to be that big when it's next to your hand.
Yeah, exactly. So like here's a can of soda in here.
My goodness.
So it's pretty big. And Alan
does
it
have a hardware accelerator for the AES encryption inside of that thing?
It does.
That's huge.
It does.
It's like it does?
It does. And it's actually the reason it's large, I'm told, is because it has multiple channels in order to get to the performance that the USB 3.0 performance that you need to see. For example, here we haven't posted anything on it yet, but I ran tests this afternoon, and I was able to get under standard USB 2.0 configuration, 33 megs per second read speed, 27 megs per second write speed. That's actually pretty good for a standard USB thumb drive. With the USB 3.0 port on my computer, we got 196 megabytes per second read and 85 megabytes per second write.
How did you get the USB 3.0 port on your computer? Was it on the motherboard or was it an add-in board?
It was on the motherboard. My system has the Asus. I was using the Asus P7 P55D Premium, which is a P55 motherboard that of the LGA 1156 processors from Intel, and then it uses the NEC 300. NEC 300, I think, is the chipset it's using for the USB 3.0 support. Or you can buy. We've talked about those a lot. Asus sells an add-in card for $30 for $29, and it adds 2 USB 3.0 ports and 2 SATA 6.0 gigabit per second ports to your computer for $30. So that's pretty good. It's a really, really cheap upgrade, I think, and especially, if you do a lot of moving data back and forth between computers and that kind of stuff, 196 megs a second versus 38 megs a second is a huge difference. And actually, Super Talent has a driver for it that it kind of replaces the default Microsoft USB driver. And when we did that, we actually got as high as 235 megs per second read speed on it, and 100 megs per second.
Is this USB 3.0 going to kill eSATA?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. Because, we're talking about this is as fast as an SSD in a SATA 3.0 SSD in your system today. That's the speeds of 230 megs per second reads, 100 megs per second writes is as fast as an Intel X25M drive. Now that's peak throughputs and all that kind of stuff. So there's still going to be some advantages to having your drive internal. But
you also get the ability to plug it in and it just works, which is something that SATA will never get down.
You think about it, there's no reason. This is a 32 gig model, and I think it sells for like $160, $150. So it's a little bit high, but it's brand new technology. It has the AES encryption and all that kind of stuff, which could be cool for if we get to the point. I don't think you can do it today physically, but install Windows 7 on this, a default version, where you don't have to depend on a lot of drivers, where you could just take this from machine to machine and boot up your entire operating system off of your thumb drive and be at full speed. And then, I'm here at the office today recording this show. I take it home with me. I plug it into my computer at home, and it boots up with Windows 7 and all that other kind of stuff, right? And you don't have to worry about moving data back and forth or anything like that. This goes up to 128 gigs. They sell a 128 gig model of it as well.
You just have to worry about losing your life on your USB.
Yes. I'm
it's
not
kind of
saying
funny
not to make
because
a backup.
It's a pendulum swing. Like, okay, we're going to put everything in the cloud, and everybody realizes that sometimes you can't attach to the cloud, and the cloud's usually a lot slower than you remember it being, at least during the marketing pitch when you sign the deal, and all of a sudden everything's swinging back over to, hey, I can actually have hardened encryption on a drive that's, and I can keep it with me locally as long as you don't lose it, which is always bad.
I would still make a backup. Yes, definitely. But the convenience. Maybe if we get to a point where the operating system is smart enough to maybe let you create hardware profiles where you can quickly switch the OS from machine to machine, you plug it into my laptop when I'm on the road, right? Or something like that.
Well,
there's all kinds of ideas for it.
I run around with Windows 7, an installable version on USB key wherever I go, USB 2.0, and I also have it set up to work via eSATA because it's one of those eSATA/USB thumb drives. I would love for it to be USB 3.0 because whenever people say, oh, I screwed up my system, I need to reinstall Windows, bam, 10 minutes, done.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
Yep. So yeah, that's. I think that's all I got for hardware show and tell. Do we want to? We got any other big stories we got, but we want to jump into some Twitter questions today.
I say it's time for Twitter questions.
All right.
It has been deemed.
I'm ready. IT Master, or I should say at IT Master, asks Ryan Shrout, what wattage power supply unit would you recommend for my Windows Home server build? I'm going to have 8 SATA 2 hard disk drives, a Core 2 Duo, 2 SATA cards, and 2 Network, which I'm going to brazenly assume is network cards. Thanks.
See, this is why I make you read them.
That's a lot of hard drives. I would say go with at least a 500 watt and possibly an 850 watt power supply. ... But buy a quality power supply, because an 850 watt power supply from a crappy company may not be as good as like a 300 watt, 400 watt power supply from a more reputable manufacturer. A lot of problems with your computer that you think are Windows based or because something in the ether hates you can actually be traced back to having a cheap ass power supply unit. And unfortunately, name brand is not necessarily a guarantee that you're going to get a quality power supply experience.
No, not at all. I think your recommendation in terms of like a 500, he doesn't mention graphics cards, which is in reality one of the bigger players in what type of power supply you need. I'm assuming if he did mention it, it's going to be kind of like an average graphics card.
50 watts versus 150 watts.
Right. So I would say, like a good 500, 550. One of the ones that we have had tremendous success with is there's a Corsair 550 watt power supply that we have used for tons of stuff in the office, for systems, for test beds, and that kind of thing. And you're right, we've seen power supplies rated at 500, outperforming ones rated at 700. It all depends on quality build and all that kind of stuff. And even though all power supplies are really in kind of reality made by 3 companies in China, when you really want to get down to it, it all comes down to what specifications the resale vendor says that they have to stick to. Right. So it's quality of components and all that kind of stuff. So we do have power supply reviews at PCPer.com at least a couple a month, I would say, and to go there and check out kind of what we've got on the list. But it's always good to read reviews at Newegg site or Amazon.com, that kind of stuff. User reviews are also helpful there.
Yes, especially if there's several hundred of them. I remember one of my favorite moments was, having a motherboard die on me and going up on Newegg and realizing that literally 50% of the people that had purchased this particular motherboard had it fail.
Feel better when it's like, I didn't do anything wrong.
Yeah, it wasn't me. I swear. Look, all these other people had that problem.
And then he wipes off all the coolant and sends it back.
Yeah.
No. This was a pre-built, somebody else manufactured it, sealed, unmodified, not overclocked, gently handled, lovingly handled machine that just died one day. It happens. Let's see. I'm just going to annoy this person by not pronouncing the word they chose. J3SUSD asks, do you get any noticeable performance boost between 4 gigabytes of DDR3 RAM at 1333 megahertz versus 4 gigabytes of DDR3 RAM at 1600 megahertz? Anything you're going to notice in the real world, Ryan? I'm going to venture to say no.
Yeah, the answer is kind of like no. Very, very rare instances. Maybe if you're at the bleeding edge of transcoding time performance, you might see a little bit of increase there. But in reality, the answer is no. All of our testing is done at 1333. All of my systems kind of run at those standard speeds. And unfortunately for memory manufacturers, the benefits of memory overclocking kind of dwindled as we went through DDR2 and DDR3. Hence why all the primary memory vendors for enthusiasts have moved into the worlds of SSDs and cases and cooling and a lot of other profitable differentiating items as well. So no, the answer to that, I guess, would be no. Like when there's
naked. Yeah, simple's good. Here's another simple one, except it's not simple. At Naked Fable asks, Intel CPUs perform better, but AMD seems to support chipsets longer. What do you suggest for budget builders on the 5-year plan? You don't really, Naked Fable, it doesn't really matter how long they support the chipset, because generally speaking, everything's going to top out, and then the entire industry is going to move beyond your hardware. You can just, if you're going to hold on to it for 5 years, I you know, I've used machines for 5 years and updated the you know, the drivers for the motherboard like once.
Right.
I'm just like, you know, oh, my USB ports work, I'm done. You know,
right.
Because you know, maybe other than the occasional BIOS upgrade, which I don't know, everybody I know is back and forth. They're either like, you should definitely put every single BIOS upgrade for your motherboard immediately because firmware is critical for the overall performance enhancement of the machine, versus people are like, if it's not broke, don't fix it. And I've actually seen motherboard vendors who are like, do not apply this upgrade unless it's fixing something you have a problem with, which...
Yeah. Most of them actually say that, yeah, because every time you flash your BIOS, it's another opportunity for you to break everything, and they don't want to have to deal with your RMA. That is 100% right. As for like, I think one of the things he's getting at is the fact that if you bought an AM2 motherboard from AMD 4 years ago, you can put, or an AM2 Plus motherboard, AM2 Plus socket motherboard, you can add this 6-core system with a BIOS update.
Well, that's also kind of a, you know, it's almost like the socket wars, you know. In that case, yeah, okay, AMD is going to support chipsets longer in the sense that they're going to use the same socket on the motherboard. The chipset doesn't really matter as much in some ways as the socket.
Correct.
I don't want to start talking about sockets because I'll turn into a screaming, nasty rant. But yeah, the question is, you know, at some point the motherboard, at some point, like after 5 years, the way processors are going, like after, you know, 3 years, you're going to be looking around and looking at the new architectures and thinking like, I really want to upgrade everything. You know, or at least that's the feeling. Because like I said, I've had a lot of machines I've used for 5 years they're $500, you know, low-end gaming machines, or, you know, and it's, you know what I mean? Like it usually makes sense to upgrade the graphics card once. I usually upgrade the hard drive several times. I've gone from Wi-Fi B to Wi-Fi G. But yeah, it would be nice to upgrade the processor without upgrading the motherboard, especially when it gets to the point where you're getting like, you know, double the performance out of the same socket. That would be nice to do a couple years into it.
AMD's definitely been better for that.
Depending on what you're doing with your motherboard, also, I find that a lot of times people try to draw out how long they use their motherboard for. They're like, oh, I want to just change the chip 2 or 3 times, and they'll pay twice as much for a chip that's half the speed of something that's got a different socket, where they could just pay, you know, $60 for a new motherboard and drop that in too and save a lot of money and get a lot more speed. And it's just like, no, just abandon the motherboard when it's time.
Sometimes I'm going to say goodbye.
I'm going to take this next one. It is Soapy Illusions asks, will Linux users be getting drivers for NVIDIA's Optimus? And if so, do you have any idea how long we will need to wait for them? I kind of did a little bit of searching around on this, and the kind of answer I got, not an official answer, was don't hold your breath for support on this. It's very much a Windows-centric type application. Hardware, software interaction, that kind of stuff. I don't think we're going to see.
Who's going to take bets for when that's going to change?
I don't think it will.
I don't think it's going to change.
No, I wouldn't count on it at all.
Wonder what he's running. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I wonder what he's running that he wants on. Is he running a Myth TV box or something where he wants?
That would be for a laptop.
Linux, I was going to say Linux on a notebook for improved graphics performance.
And battery life.
It's hard to be a Linux user.
It is. We got 2 questions, actually. One from Brian1000 and the other one from Blah91, asking essentially for ideas for basic inexpensive laptops to use at college next fall, something around the sub $500 range. And I thought, you know, obviously we're talking about netbooks and notebooks and all that kind of stuff. What do we all kind of recommend for that? And I knew Patrick and Colleen would have at least a couple of suggestions for this.
Netbooks are really cool. I would not want my netbook to be my primary computer at college. No. I think because when your notebook at school, it's going to be where you consume a lot of your media, whether it's CDs or MP3s or DVDs. In a couple of years, Blu-ray is going to be so cheap that everybody's going to want it in their dorm room. As a matter of fact, I saw a Blu-ray stand the other day in a 7-Eleven selling Blu-ray discs for $11, and actually some really not you would think that would be like Night of the Living Weasels Part 7, but there are actually some really good titles on this rack for like $11. And as far as I'm concerned, if I'm in a 7-Eleven in a small town, Blu-ray's here. So everybody who hates Blu-ray keep hating on it, but that's at this point I would say go with a full size 13 or 15 inch screen, because you're going to be carrying this thing to classes. And everybody they said they're like a 17-inch screen. It's great. Well, the truth is that flat panels are so cheap. You should use a small screen that you're carrying around, because a pound or two in your knapsack is a lot more noticeable than you would really ever believe.
By that you mean a backpack?
Knapsack, backpack, these are all common terms. You may mock my use of language. At
least you can do it with finesse, unlike me.
Everybody needs a hobby. But yeah, probably a 13 to 15 inch monitor. I'd go with I'm really big on the Core 2 Duos in notebooks. I think they're pretty fantastic. The Core i3 and Core i5 are doing a really good job. There's some deals on those. If you pay attention, sometimes you can find a pretty good refurbished deal. I would go refurbish with somebody like a mail order vendor like Dell. A lot of the refurbished deals, I've noticed, there's or the out of box deals or the demo deals in Best Buy, they tend to be not so good. Yeah, a lot of the big box stores, they'll basically take $5 off the price of a notebook that's or a home theater receiver or an HDTV. They'll take a minuscule chunk off of the price of that, and it's usually been beaten to hell from people grabbing it and shaking it.
Don't do that.
And it's often at the end of life, so you're basically buying 6-month-old or last year's technology, and oftentimes paying as much as the new chunk of technology would cost you, or awfully close to it. Also, with notebooks, a lot of times there's really good seasonal deals going into back to school, and watch out for that. But also find out if your school offers any kind of discount buying plan. That's just the kind of a classic way to get a Macintosh computer at a decent price.
That's true.
The least expensive Mac is still going to be like twice what you guys want to pay. But yeah. Let's see. Yeah, Celeron 900, Pentium dual core T4400. That's not bad. That's 500.
The one he links to like a Dell Inspiron laptop as well, Intel Pentium processor, 2.2 gigahertz, up to like 4.5 hours of battery life. It's a pretty decent system. It is a a 13-inch, 15.6-inch screen size. So I mean, it's a decent machine. It's $499. They're selling it at Best Buy apparently.
That's a pretty good deal.
Yeah, one thing I would always say is if you can, go into the store and play around on the keyboard for a good 15 minutes. One of the things people are always worried about specs and all that kind of thing. Really, the keyboard on a laptop is almost as important to me as anything else anymore.
I'd say the keyboard and that's why you guys mentioned Lenovo notebooks when we were talking before the show, and Lenovo still has a fantastic keyboard. That was one of the things that made ThinkPad so popular with people who type for a living, is that you had this beautiful tactile response on a keyboard, and people are probably sitting at home thinking tactile response, but when you've used some of the notebook keyboards out there where the key spacing is odd, or there's a very minute amount of travel.
A lot of netbooks like that now.
A lot of netbooks like that, and
the Dell ones, the HP ones.
The Dells are actually really good now. I own 2 of them.
The original Dell netbooks were unusable. The keyboards.
All of the original netbooks were unusable. All of the original netbooks, they were all of them. They had 70%. I used to live. It's not like I have small hands. I used to live on a Toshiba Portage, which had an 82% keyboard and what I will affectionately call an unusual keyboard layout. You had to be able to do weird things to reach key combinations to do things like cut and paste. But the original, certainly the first generation of netbooks if you were a touch typist and you were a touch typist at any speed, if you actually learned how to properly type, all of the original round of netbooks from all of the manufacturers were absolutely unusable. And not just for people with big hands. They were absolutely unusable. All of the netbooks out now have big keyboards, vastly improved keyboards. They have better keyboard layouts, which make them much more functional. I would definitely, for bargains, also, outlets and refurbished from the manufacturer.
That's going to be my recommendation.
Dell outlets I buy from Dell outlets monitors and servers all the time,
and a lot of times they're brand new out of the box.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if somebody orders something and it's not right, they'll often just send it straight back.
Yeah, no, I've bought a bunch of Dell refurb stuff, and I couldn't tell a difference between being brand new and not. It's got all the plastic wrap on it. I couldn't find any human marks anywhere. But my recommendation on this is going to be to go ahead and get yourself a refurbished Lenovo T-Series ThinkPad, because in college you need something that is portable, but you need something that is actually a real computer at the same time.
Right.
That's the T-Series. The T-Series is also, it's durable. It's versatile. You can plug an external monitor in, so get yourself like a 14-inch one. So that's portable enough that you can take it everywhere, but big enough that you could actually write papers on it. And get yourself a nice external monitor, and you can get a brand new, quote brand new, a refurb for $500, and that's a pro level top awesome laptop. And I've had one for 4 years, a T60, and that I think that's your best bet. And it's got the awesome keyboard, and
That's something I think a lot of college kids don't take into account, is the durability of a laptop. If you're going to throw it in and out of your book bag and in and out on your desk, you're 5 times a day, 10 times a day as you go to and from class.
If it's not a ThinkPad or a plastic MacBook or a machined MacBook, it will not survive 4 years of college.
Well,
it's amazing.
Nothing survives 4 years of college, but
that's true. That is also true.
I mean,
I think the Dell Studios would hold up. I think any notebook getting through 3 years of college would mean that it's owned by someone. Well, yeah, but that would also mean that it's owned by somebody who's actually very, very cautious and careful with their things.
But the thing is, in college, it's an environment where no matter how cautious and careful you are, the other people might not be.
Oh, that's what I was just about to say. You also want to make sure you don't have the roommate from hell.
Or if it's on a desk and there's people, kind of scooch in front of you, their backpack hits the front of the LCD, falls on the floor, snaps in half. Happens all the time.
That makes me sad. I am sad, Panda, and glad that I'm not in college.
No. I would still rather be. I would still like to be back in college some days. But
buy yourself a tank of a laptop. Seriously, if you want it to survive, you need to get something that is specifically made to be durable, like a MacBook or a ThinkPad. Don't get yourself just anything.
Don't bother stretching to the tough book world, though.
No, I'm not saying you need to get yourself a mil-spec laptop.
I also would say I would avoid the plastic MacBooks. The keyboard covers still crack through. The white ones turn a wonderful shade of brown that makes me want to vomit every time I touch it. The white plastic on the MacBooks is really unfortunate. They will actually now replace that. Which is nice. If get your appointment with your Apple Genius, you can get that swapped out.
I will say those things were far more durable than the stamped aluminum MacBook Pros.
Yes.
Those things bent so much.
Yes, which is why they
to the quote unibody design, which is not a unibody.
All right, I think that will.
You don't want to pick up the unibody argument?
That is not a unibody. It's just that it's milled rather than stamped.
No.
Would you rather them just call it the pretty body?
No, call it the milled body.
The billet body.
I don't want to get into manufacturing processing discussions right now.
I think that
we have to do that at the beginning.
Totally
of the show,
badass.
So.
Milling a laptop is awesome. Don't get me wrong on that.
I want to see the gigantic room full of CNC milling machines that are ripping those things out 24/7, 365. It must be creepy.
You take a trip to Shenzhen, China, maybe you could see them, right?
I don't think they're ever going to let me near that place.
But I think there should almost be a website dedicated to all the horrific dents and mangled MacBook Pros, the aluminum ones, with such soft metal that you look at it funny and it warps. I just want to see, because everyone's got some sort of weird battle scars on theirs.
But it does. I mean, if you drop $2,000 on your notebook and the first time you set it down in a coffee shop, you manage to dent it. Yes, I can see where the anger from that would hold on for years and years.
No, it never happened to me.
I would see that
because I never purchased one of those.
Actually, just search for MacBook Pro dent on.
If you're a PC Windows user, you want a good laugh.
But Yeah, Bear, our server guy, recently got clipped by a cab while he was in San Francisco, and he got knocked over and he fell on his laptop and is now literally bent. And you can see right
Having
here.
been hit by a car a couple times in my life, I'd actually be much more concerned about, surviving being hit by the cab. Yeah.
They literally get bent. It's like tinfoil, and there's no way to correct it because the metal is now expanded. No, the metal expands.
You buy a new case.
Oh.
And you spend a few hours of your life swapping it into the new case.
I was going to go with land on the other side, but I guess you can do that too.
No, that's not how it works. It's like tinfoil.
Land on your head to protect the notebook. Mm-hmm.
All right, now that we're just talking, let's end the show.
All right. So let's wrap up the show here. You can find me at pcper.com. Where we do a lot of reviews and news about the PC hardware world. Where can we find you, Colleen?
You can find me on Twitter at twitter.com/digitalkitty. Let me see, lower third. There we go, right down there.
And nobody could see it in that view. But and Patrick, we got you at techzilla.com.
Techzilla.com and hdnation.tv. Techzilla is basically hands-on geeking with product reviews and how-tos and tips. With Veronica Belmont, I do that every week. And then with Robert Heron, I do HD Nation, which is basically HD content and HD hardware. We love shiny, happy video, and we love figuring out the best way to get it into your house. And surround sound is good, too.
Who's your favorite
Have you guys played with the 3D TVs yet?
Robert's played with every 3D HDTV out there. I got some hands-on time with one back at CES, which was kind of interesting. And Ben Drobo over at Engadget HD kind of keyed me into what he thinks is the killer application for 3D HD TVs, which is sports. Not so much with the movies, but he's a big college football guy, and for him he was kind of like, and I'm still kind of like with 3D for movies and stuff, but this is somebody who's pretty conservative about the whole 3D concept, who got to watch a football game in 3D and was just like, this is why this technology exists, so. I don't know. Sorry, you mentioned 3D. I started thinking about it out loud. And obviously Avatar, I think is going to be a big influence, assuming that Fox ever decides that there's an actual 3D platform to port it to, because all of the Blu-rays from Fox are all 2D at this point and will be for the foreseeable future. So,
if you want to watch us record this live, you can do so. Our schedule, I believe, is changing as of next week. I think we're going to record next week on Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific time. Is that right, Patrick? Do I have that correct, I believe?
6 p.m. Pacific, 9 p.m. Eastern, yes.
Okay, all right. We got that good. So if you want to tune in for our live showing, you can do that live.twit.tv, or, of course, you can continue to find us at twit.tv/Twitch. So with that, we thank you, and we'll talk to you next week.